2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. 1 and 4. I would like to say good evening. I would like to especially say good evening to all 15 people that sat in the middle section tonight. I don't know why we're parting the Red Sea like this, but I don't know if I'm just not pleasant to look at straight on. Maybe that's what the problem is, but I'm glad everybody's here tonight, wherever you're sitting. I'm really excited about our second melting pot class, and so after our devotional period tonight, especially for those that are visiting or haven't been here on our Sunday nights to know the schedule, we'll have 3 different classes. All of our young ones will be able to go. I think all of them are going downstairs one way or the other. Is that right, John? Is everybody... What? Oh, they're going with me. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Well, Autumn and I will be talking about marriage in our class, so please send the 3rd graders with me, and we will discuss that. But in here, Terry will be doing a class, things I learned in the 1st grade, got off to a good start last month. Autumn and I will be back in the teen room. We'll be doing a marriage class, and then Zach Dayton will be doing a class, How We Got the Bible, in the other back classroom, the adult classroom, up the ramp that way. So 3 good opportunities to learn some great stuff tonight and participate in those. As we have a period together now of devotional, I'd like to ask you to open up your Bibles to Ezekiel chapter 22. Ezekiel chapter 22, and we're going to have a devotional in just a moment after a song with a thought from Ezekiel 22, as well as an article that I found last week on daylight savings time. I can't wait to share with you this article. John, what's our first song tonight? 648. So you can also go ahead and open up a songbook to 648. Of course, we'll start with prayer. After we pray together, John will lead us in 648. We'll offer the invitation with a devotional thought, and then we'll have some announcements before we break up for our different classes tonight. Let's begin with a pause and bowing our heads and going to God together. Would you bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we are blessed to be here tonight and to be able to spend this time together. And as I think about those that are here to be together tonight and to spend this hour, I thank you for them, and I ask that you would bless them, bless us as we embark on these studies, that you would help us to share wisdom, to gain insight, and not just to have knowledge in our heads, but to learn how to place these things into our lives in such a way that we can be the kind of people that you want us to be. We can be like that city set on a hill and shine like stars in the night sky. Forgive us when we fall and give us the strength to stand and to try again. And we offer this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please mark, if you would, number 238. 238. You Are the Song That I Sing. We'll sing after the invitation in just a moment. And there are 2 classes downstairs. If you're visiting or your child is 2 years old through the 1st grade, if you go down the stairs and to the left, I believe they'll be down the last door to the left, and then the 2nd grade through the 6th will be in the fellowship hall. So those are the 2 classes downstairs up to 6th grade. Let's stand and sing Stand Up. Stand up for Jesus, please. Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. Lift high royal banner, in must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, His army shall be. Till
I found an article on Thursday entitled, "Everyone Was Surprised by the Senate Passing Permanent Daylight Savings Time, Especially the Senators." Did you know that happened last week? Last Tuesday, the Senate unanimously passed a bill that would mean we do not have to fall back on our calendar, on our clocks, 1 hour in the fall of the year. Now, it wouldn't go into effect this year. It would go into effect next year. But that was passed. Of course, the state of Alabama last year, the state of Alabama said, yeah, we'll play along if the federal government does that. We'll participate, that kind of thing. But this bill was passed last week, and it was a shock to everybody. This is an article by Paul McLeod. You can find this online. I found it interesting. I mean, I know it was clickbait, but it worked. I clicked it. Everybody was surprised, especially the senators. And the article begins this way. I'm going to read a couple of highlights. The Senate's unanimous passage of a bill to make daylight savings time permanent stunned many Americans, not the least of which the senators themselves. Because Tuesday afternoon, when the Sunshine Protection Act sailed through the Senate without issue, no senator spoke up to object to passing it by unanimous consent. Now here's where you may wonder what's going on. If you watched, Autumn and I had this conversation, if you watched Schoolhouse Rock growing up, there's that song about I'm just a bill and how a bill becomes law and all this kind of stuff. And you got to go through this really long process. It says usually the way the Senate works, to pass a bill, you go through the chamber. It's a long and painful process. You have to go through a committee, and then you have to ask the majority leader to put it to a vote, and then the Senate majority leader tells you no because we don't have time for it, and then you finally get it onto the floor to go for a vote, but you have to spend hours on debate and multiple rounds of votes. None of that happened on Tuesday. On Tuesday, a senator stood up and said, I'd like to unanimously pass the bill to make daylight savings time permanent. And it was. That's all it took. Did you know that was possible? Did you know that was something that could happen in Washington, D.C.? That at any point, any senator can stand up and say, I'd like for this bill to be passed with unanimous consent. Anytime they want. Now, the problem is only one senator has to object. If anybody in the chamber says, I object to that, well, then it's dead. It dies right there. They said in the article that senators ask for unanimous consent all the time, but it's usually just for show. They do it knowing that it's going to get shot down, but then they can show themselves on C-SPAN trying to get their vote passed for their constituents, and they can say, see, I tried to do it, and these mean people over here, they just wouldn't vote for my bill. And they wouldn't pass it. Now, I'm trying to make this quick, because we've got other things that we've got to do, but this article fascinated me. Any single senator could have blocked the daylight savings bill, but many didn't even know it was happening. When Senator Chris Coons was asked by this reporter to recreate his reaction to the news the bill had passed, he issued a series of, I quote, shocked stammers that it is impossible to phonetically translate. Another senator, when asked what was going on, it's literally an issue my staff and I never discussed, and they made an assumption that I don't really care about daylight savings time, Coons said. And I don't know if I do. I've never taken 5 minutes to stop and think about it. Another senator was quoted as saying, when he was asked by the reporter, did you know that this move was coming, didn't explicitly answer, but said, it wasn't like my highest priority in the U.S. Senate. That's the kind of conversation about this particular bill when it came out. Because usually what happens is, if there's a bill that they want to ask to be passed in this fashion, it's up to the senator to call everybody's office and say, hey, I'm going to do this on Tuesday. What do you think about it? And if any of the senators, when they call them, say, no, I object to that, then they won't do it. But when they went through the process of doing this particular bill last week, nobody said, I have a problem with that. They talked to the staff of every senator. The problem is, let me see where it says this. During this process, a senator's legislative director typically vets the request. In other words, they'll look at it and see, is this something that really matters to my boss or not? And if it matters to my boss, then I'll take it to him. But if he doesn't care about it, then I'm not going to bother him. He's got enough on his plate to worry about. And so apparently enough legislative directors, enough chiefs of staff of these senators thought, this is not an issue that I'm going to bother my senator with. And so when it came up in the Senate floor, there weren't enough people there. And nobody said, I object. And so in about 5 minutes, we have potentially done away with daylight savings time. Or we've made it permanent, or rather, excuse me. We've made this permanent. We're not going to be rolling clocks forwards and backwards and things because they couldn't be bothered to show up. They couldn't be bothered to come into the Senate chamber. Now, I'm personally kind of excited about that. I'm looking forward to not having my personal body clock and my circadian rhythm, thrown off track, for 4 days every, time we have to roll the clocks forward or backward. But it did remind me of this idea in Ezekiel 22 and verse 30. God speaking says, I sought for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand in the gap before me for the land, so that I would not destroy it, but I found none. How many times in life, how many times in society does something slip through the cracks? Does something get started or get done, and it manages to survive, it manages to stand, it manages to pass, because everybody else is waiting for somebody else to stand up to it or to say something about it. Hey, we probably shouldn't do that. You know the quote, you know the phrase, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men should do nothing. Right? You don't have to be an evil person. If you allow evil to happen, then you will cause evil to succeed. There's this idea in Ezekiel 22 that God is looking for people who are willing to be repairing, willing to be standing, willing to be responsible, willing to take action. And it's crazy to think about how simple a major change can take place if nobody's willing to stand up and pay attention to do something about it. It's a silly example, but it reminds us about how important our individual responsibilities are in our lives. And I want to encourage us to be willing to, as Ezekiel says, that phrase, to stand in the gap, to be willing to stand up, to be willing to take a stand, to be personally responsible for doing the right thing when we see something that's not right. Tonight, if you need to take a stand for something or to ask for help to do something better or right, and we want to offer you that moment now. If you'd like to do so publicly, you can come forward while we stand together and while we sing. You are the words of music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praising your name, I feel free. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song that I sing. You are the words and the music.
Just a couple of announcements before we're dismissed to go to our classes. If you are here and have not had the opportunity to partake of the Lord's Supper, it is prepared for you. If you go through the door to my right at this time, someone will be there to serve you. I've got a note from, Courtney Patterson. If anyone has any pictures from any church activities this past year, please print them and give to Courtney by Wednesday night. They're trying to finalize the scrapbook for Last of Leaders. So please help Courtney if you've got some of those pictures. Remind you, next Sunday afternoon, they'll be putting together the Magi boxes. That'll be here at 3 o'clock. Please do continue to remember all those that are scrolling, those that are sick. Want to continue to remember Patsy. She did make it home. Continue to remember her and send her cards, send her some text, let her know that we're thinking and praying about her, and remember all the others too. We did mention this morning also 2 men that have been put before the congregation to serve as deacons, Justin Marks and Brandon Ballantyne. Please keep these two and their families in your prayers. And if you have any reason that you would object to one of them serving, please let us know within the next couple of weeks. And we appreciate all that each of you do. I think that's all the announcements that I had. I want to remind the ones that are here in the auditorium, we tried to move up to the first 10 rows on either side or in the middle. The middle is real vacant. You can come up to the middle. But when we're dismissed, if those in the auditorium will be coming up to the first 10 rows. Thank you. Let's be dismissed.
Janet just sent me a text and said, thank you so much for being her messenger. Yes, thank you.
Am I on? Everybody hear me? Good. Y'all did good. Thank y'all for moving up.
I don't want to go to my class. I want to go to your class.
You're too young.
I'm too young.
I was just kidding. Good to have everybody tonight. We started a study a month ago on things I learned in first grade. Wow. What did some of you learn in first grade? ABCs? Huh? 1, 2, 3s? Keep your hands to yourself. Yes, they do. Anybody else? Isn't it a shame a lot more don't learn that? Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, please. Yes. There's a lot of things that we learned in the first grade, and we didn't realize we were learning them at the time we learned them, did we? Because they were part of what? It was part of what was taught each and every day. If we could go back to those times. This book is written by Ken Butterworth. Ken did not grow up as a going to church. His wife, when he met his soon-to-be wife, she converted Ken, and he's been teaching and preaching for years and years. He wrote this book when he was 63, so he'd been around the block a few times. He knew what was going on. He'd been through many roadblocks and hurdles. So Ken has got a lot of valuable information in this book. And as I told you last month, you're not going to hear anything that you didn't already know. But I hope that it'll be re-emphasized and that you'll pass it on to someone else. But we started out last month talking about we all have someone that we influence each and every day, either for good or for bad. So we always need to be on our guard about our influence each and every day. What was the title of the lesson last month? Anybody remember? All life is not fair. All life is not fair. What all went on in this world in the last month since we met in this class? Just think, what all has went on in this world since last month when we met? Yes. Do you think the people in Ukraine would have ever thought that they would be fleeing their country? And I mean, you know, some of the things that you see on TV, I mean, it's really hard to watch. It's really hard to watch. Me and Brother Lewis was talking this morning. You know, how thankful are you that you were born or live in this area, this country? We are a blessed people to be able to do that. But I just want to remind you of a couple of sayings that I didn't get to last time. That when he's talking about all life is not fair, he says in conclusion, he says, life is precious and short, and you are not immortal. When we was growing up, we thought what? We thought we were immortal. Me and Lewis was having another conversation this morning about that. You know, we're not. We're not. He says winners and losers are a part of real life. Winners and losers. Entry-level jobs do not start at $100,000 a year. The foundation for a job has to be laid with education, patience, and guess what? Hard work. There's no substitute for it. Drugs and alcohol do not make you cool. Life's difficulties, problems, and troubles are not solved in 30 minutes. The real world does not care nearly as much about your ego and self-esteem as you do. Semester breaks and free at last summer vacations are not parts of the real adult world, are they? He says young people who believe parents are tough on them will wake up when they get a real job with a real boss. Bosses don't give ease for efforts. What are they expecting? They're expecting the best. They're expecting production. They're expecting you to make them some money. That's why they employed you to start with. The adult world makes rigid demands on all of us. How many of you have had an easy life? Okay. In reality, we have compared to other countries, yes. But is all life easy? He says genuine politeness really pays. Working for minimum wage at a fast food restaurant should not be beneath our dignity and pride. And lastly, he says you'll soon find out why your parents are not quote unquote with it and why they are old-fashioned and boring. How many of you found your parents to be pretty smart when you got about 22, 25? It's amazing how smart they become. Because as teenagers, how many teenagers we got in here? I'm not picking on you. How many teenagers we got? Okay. How many of you think that your parents are old-fashioned? Okay. All right. Y'all can be honest. In about 5 or 10 more years, I'd love to ask you that same question. It'd be interesting to see what the reaction would be at that time. This week's lesson is another thing that he learned in the first grade. Somebody turn and read Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Somebody else look up Proverbs 11, verse 1. Somebody look up Proverbs 20, verse 10. And somebody else look up Proverbs 20, verse 23. Why do I always get text when I'm up here teaching? Okay. Who's got Matthew 7, verse 12? And that's also known as what? Golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Wouldn't this be a better world if everybody would do that and practice that? Somebody read Proverbs 11, verse 1. And somebody read Proverbs 20, verse 10. And then chapter 20, verse 23. Did y'all notice anything similar about those last three verses we read? They all read what? About the same. Almost exactly the same. And it's telling us that dishonesty does not pay. The lesson tonight, or the first part, is I learned in the first grade to play fair. How many of you learned to play fair when you was young in elementary school? Okay. Did any of you ever get bullied on the playground? Okay. Anybody ever have a fight on the playground? Okay. All right. Did you learn something from it? Okay. We all definitely have learned something. Ken says here, even before I started the school, my mother admonished Ken, cheaters sometimes appear to win, but they never do. Their cheating will always catch up with them. Remember to play hard and fair. Then when you win, you'll be a real winner. Don't ever forget that. Soon after I entered first grade, Miss Worthy, my first grade teacher, noticed honesty and hard-working characteristics my parents had instilled in me. We got any teachers in here? Okay? We've got several teachers here at Petersville. A lot of them are in different classes. Do you think a teacher can tell when she gets students in her class if they've been taught good manners at home? First day. I've got two sons that teach and a daughter-in-law that teaches. And I've heard some real interesting stories from them. One teaches third grade. One teaches kids at risk. And another one teaches 8th grade history. So they're all from elementary through senior high. So they've seen a little bit of everything. And they've also seen a lot of things from children that will break your heart. Because they're growing up in situations that most of us are not familiar with, have never been a part of. And I'll never forget Jonathan telling me the first or second year he was teaching that he didn't really know how to react to a couple of situations that he had encountered. Because he was in situations that he had never been a part of, as far as children from different home lives that were going through things that I want to say is not the norm, but sadly to say it is the norm now in situations like that. But you know, we've got to learn to play fair and practice the golden rule. Somebody turn to John chapter 9 and read verse 4. John chapter 9 and read verse 4. Night is coming when no one can work. How many of you consider it a good day when you're able to work outside all day until almost dark? I consider that a good day. If you're outside, you're working. I don't like to be cooped up on days like this, on days that it's beautiful outside. Somebody turn to Romans chapter 12, verse 17, and somebody get Colossians 3:23. And then somebody get Philippians 3:16. Somebody got Romans 12:17? Repay no one evil for evil. And then basically he finishes the rest of that verse with basically the golden rule, doesn't he? Basically, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Colossians 3:23.
Whatever you do, do it enthusiastically. Have something done for the Lord and not for men.
Whatever you do it enthusiastically. Philippians 3:16. Only let us hold true to that which we have attained. And then somebody look up Galatians 6:7 and somebody Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10. Whatever a man sows, that he shall also reap. In Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. Did Jesus do anything half-heartedly? Nothing did he do half-heartedly. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, how many times did he pray to God if this cup could pass from him? 3 times. And one time he prayed so hard, what? Sweat turned to blood. Did he do anything half-heartedly? Nothing. When he approached God himself, he did it wholeheartedly, even sweating drips of blood. We have the great example. Ken says here, he said, all who walked with Jesus and all who have read historical accounts of his life know he never engaged in shoddy work. He was never dishonest, never did anything half-heartedly, and neither should we. We all admire a person who engages in activities honestly and with all their might. Playing hard and playing to win makes sense, regardless of the aspect of life. If it's worth pursuing, it's worth winning. Let me read that again. Regardless of the aspect of life, if it's worth pursuing, it's worth winning. How many of you have been watching any of the March Madness? What is March Madness? Okay, NCAA basketball tournament. How many of you happened to watch that North Carolina Baylor game yesterday? North Carolina was winning by, I think, 24 points with 10 minutes to go in the game. Their best player, who already had 27 points, fouled out. No, he got ejected because of a flagrant foul. Baylor took the game into overtime. They come back from a 24-point deficit. But in the end, North Carolina prevailed. Did Baylor ever give up? They was down 24 points. No, they didn't give up. Do you think Baylor, who was the number 1 seed, said after the game, it's okay? What do you think they were doing in the locker room? Nothing wrong with winning. I don't like to lose in nothing. I like to win in everything I do. There's nothing wrong with winning. The world today will teach you that what? Everybody's a winner. Everybody's not a winner. Life is not fair. Life is tough and life is difficult. And if you think that everyone's going to win, you're going to get run over and trampled. Because you got to have some self-esteem. You got to want to win. You got to want to do better. You got to want to reach your goals. So there's nothing wrong with winning. Now, when it becomes wrong is when you do what? You win in the wrong way. You cheat to win. Or you become a, what's the word I'm hunting for? You become an arrogant winner. That's what I was looking for. But we've got to learn, we've got to have a winning mentality, but we've also got to lose with class. How many of you have learned something from a loss? What do you think Baylor learned yesterday from that loss to North Carolina? That they can be beat. And you can't spot a team 24 points. You can't. You just can't do it. Sometimes you might come back and win, but it's tough. You're exactly right. I don't know of any good team that does not learn from a defeat. They're always going to learn from a defeat. It's just like we was talking about in class this morning. Do we learn from trials and temptations and times that we fall? I can't remember who said this, but somebody said it in some class. Sometimes a trip can prevent you from what? From a fall. So we're all going to have things that we mess up on. But he says anyone can be jubilant about winning, but we must all learn to lose with class and dignity. Cheating is dishonest. Cheating is based on a lie. The old saying, cheaters never win, is always true. And in the world today, sometimes cheaters appear to win and get ahead, but in the long run, what? They're going to lose. They're going to lose every time. Dishonesty violates all the basic rules in life. It breaks the golden rule, which is the very heart of Jesus' teaching. He says here, if we could instill this principle in the minds of our youth, it would transform our homes, workplaces, and schools overnight. God is pleased when we play by the rules. And I'd like to go back and say, if we could instill this principle in the minds of all people, not just our youth, if this could be instilled in the minds of all the leaders across the world, would we have the things going on right now that are going on across this world? No, we wouldn't. But we've got some, I don't have words to describe here. I don't know. I'm not sure what Putin's mind is thinking. Just don't get it. He's evil. That pretty much sums it up. He's evil. We've got to learn to win. But we've got to learn to win most in what? Not just in our work, not just in our sports. We got to learn to win in what? Life. We got to learn to win in life. What does it take to win in life? Okay? Build others up. What else we got to do to win in life? Discipline. Wouldn't the world be better off if we all had discipline? What else have we got to do? Be thankful for what we got. Honesty, character, integrity. What? Okay. Respectful and honorable. Yes. Amen. Right. I like that. Be the hardest worker in the room. That's good. To win at life, we got to win. We got to win every day. Are we going to win every day? But we got to try to win every day, don't we? We got to make a difference at home, at work, wherever we're at. We got to make a difference, and it takes a real and honest effort to do that. You can't just go through the motions. We've got to make a real and honest effort. But what? Yes. If you ask my opinion, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's cheating. What is our ultimate victory? Heaven. Heaven. Exactly. That's our ultimate victory. And we've got to work at that each and every day. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Another thing he says he learned in the first grade, and I want to read you this story, and I think all of you can relate to this. He says, when I was in the first grade, we lived in a house that looked very much like the Darlings house, the one on the Andy Griffith Show. It says, but knowing skunks as I've come to know them, the following event wouldn't have been much different if we'd lived in the White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Mother was fed up with the off and on smell that poured up from the quote-unquote polecat nest under the floor. Any of you ever had one under the floor? On that particular day, there was no quote-unquote off smell. It was all on. So she tackled Daddy the minute he walked in the door. Penny, the polecats are acting up again. And he says, May, I've got a pretty good nose, and I didn't think that was your cornbread and butter beans a cooking. You know I work hard to keep this house clean and our clothes fresh, Mother retorted, a little miffed. The children are always clean at school, and you are presentable even when you're going to work in the field. The polecats just make my work harder. Mama was what? She was ill. Daddy went to the closet, got out his shotgun, and disappeared. Mother was a little quieter than usual as he bumped around under the house. We caught her somber attitude and remained still. Finally, there was a couple of loud booms and more bumping around. Not only had Daddy taken care of the mama, but he had eliminated her kittens as well. He returned, rather smelly, and placed the 12 gauge back into the closet. When I walked into the kitchen, Mother said, Ken, polecats stink bad, but there are worse things in life. keep away from things that have any polecat order about them. What do you think she's talking about? Okay, let's go on with the story. Even though I could not grasp the full meaning of Mother's statement, I knew her message was an important one. A decade later, when I was grown, he must have been about, what are you in first grade, 6 years old? He must have been about 16 or 17. He says, a decade later, when I was grown, I was out with two of my friends. On that particular night, they started to turn into skunks. What do you think they was up to? Any of you ever been there? I have. Was you comfortable with it? No, I wasn't. What are you tempted to do? You're tempted to go along with the crowd. On that particular night, they started to turn into skunks. I excused myself and went home. Mother was still up waiting for me. She looked up from her embroidery board and smiled warmly as I walked into the house early. I explained without her asking. I was out with a couple of skunks tonight. They started to stink. They were smelling pretty bad, and I decided to come home. Says Mother didn't ask any questions. She lifted her head and inhaled through her nose as if she were an animal sniffing the air. I chuckled. Mother replied, yes, I can almost smell them, Ken. You're a smart boy. The real skunk odor is indelibly stamped into my brain. The slightest whiff of that terrible smell as I drive along the highway transports me back more than a half century to the Darling house. But the principle of the skunk odor Mother taught me as a first grader is stamped even deeper in my brain. Almost every time I watch the news, I get a whiff of it. Some people love it. I still hate it. May God help us. What are some things that smell like skunks today? Politicians? Politicians? Anybody else for a third politician? What are some other things that smell like skunks? Drugs? Drama? I am so thankful that I didn't grow up in an era when this thing I've got in my back pocket was popular and seems like a necessity. Because there's a lot of drama that spills out on social media. I don't participate in it. I don't know about some of y'all, but I can promise you life is a whole lot better off if you use that phone for phone calls and text messages and don't participate in social media. I don't know much that goes on. Sometimes I don't really care. So, what else? Television. It's filled with junk. Yes. Politicians again. Amen. I agree. What else smells like skunks? Injustice. And there's a lot of that across the world. What else? Are there some things that smell good, but they're really skunks? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's just so many things across this world that we live in. Think of some people in the Bible that Or before I get to that, where are some places that we have to avoid today as Christians? Okay, bars. You know, and when you say that, this is really sad, but I can remember 20, 25 years ago, you didn't want to be seen going into a restaurant that had a bar. But today, you can't hardly go in a restaurant that don't have one, can you? It's really sad. But I would say this, you can, if there's a line and they say, well, we've got a seat here at the bar, you can say thank you, but no thank you, until you can get another seat. What are some other places that we have to avoid? Okay. Exactly. There's just some places we don't need to be seen or participating. Right. Exactly. Jim, I know exactly what you're talking about. This was in about 2008 or 2006 or 7 on a trip to Mexico, and I'm driving the church bus, Petersburg Church of Christ, and the van's following us, Petersburg Church of Christ, and we're pulling in, trying to find a hotel, aren't we? Yep. Yeah. Guess what we turned into? It was a place that we didn't mean to turn into. It was a gentleman's club. So we tried to back out and get out of there as quick as we could. But, so you know, there's places you don't need to be. I'm thinking right now of an individual that bought an old church van from one of the churches. I'm not going to call any names. But he bought this church van from one of our sister congregations several years ago. But it's still got the church name on the side of it. And I see that thing all over town. And there's no telling where you're liable to see it at. I mean, it's hilarious. It's just, I'm thinking, man, paint over that thing. Do something. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be careful what you say or give to somebody, hadn't you? But it says here, he says, honky-tonks and nightclubs have the foul smell of a skunk, and they should be avoided. And there's so many other things that should be avoided. He goes on to say, there are people who must be avoided. Why is that? Exactly. Brent taught a class on the energy bus, 4 or 5 years ago? And there was one lesson on there at some point. Sometimes you got to kick them off your bus because they're bringing you down. They're draining all your energy. Now, that doesn't mean you don't love them. You still love them, but you got to separate yourself from them. So there's people that must be avoided. He says, I learned in the first grade that associating with certain people will get you into trouble. I realize that everyone has a soul and needs to be taught, but I'm referring to the kind of folks who are bent on doing evil and are up to no good. He says, yes, I learned in the first grade that some people, places, and things must be avoided because they will bring only heartache and trouble to my family and me. I learned in the first grade that it really does matter what a person reads, looks at, and thinks about. Somebody read Proverbs 23, verse 7, the first part of that verse. Proverbs 23, verse 7. As a man thinks in his heart, what? So is he. If you dwell on good things, what are you most likely going to do? You're most likely going to practice the golden rule. Do unto others you would have them do unto you. If you dwell on negative things and you hang around questionable people, what's usually going to happen? you're going to end up like them. Who usually rubs off more, the negativity or the positive person? The negativity person. Folks, in the work that I was in, there was a lot of negative people. And the reason they were negative is because they didn't want to work. Any of y'all ever been around people like that? Okay? So I didn't dwell with any of them. I spent time around positive people. You young folks that's in here, if you get anything from this, surround yourself with good people, positive people, people that work hard, people that want to do good things. Just, you know, it's so important that you do that. And he ends this lesson about skunk stink. He says, I am to beware of brethren who do not respect or stand on a quote-unquote God-said platform. He says, if these people do not teach and defend the truth of God, then I must not run with them. What's he saying here? We got to be careful who we hang around, don't we? We got evil companions corrupt good morals. You know, I said a while ago when we were talking about polecats, and when Ken come home that night, because he said he was around a couple of people were smelling like polecats. They were up to mischief. How many of you had the gumption to go home like Ken did? Or how many of you fell into the trap like I did a few times, and you did some things that you're not real proud of? That ever happened to anybody? You know, you got to be careful who you hang around. And sometimes you can be up to mischief, which you don't really see as bad. It's kind of fun, but then sometimes it turns into bad, don't it? So we got to be careful about that. And that can happen to adults as well. We just got to be careful in the things that we do each and every day. In April, we're going to be looking at a couple of more topics. There's about 20 topics. We can't cover them all, so I've got to figure out which ones exactly I want to do. Any comments? Any comments on what we've talked about tonight? Yes, exactly. And you parents, you need to be aware of all the channels on your TV, because there's a multiplicity of channels, and you need to know what everybody's watching. So be careful out there. Thank y'all so much. Have a great week.